Right, yeah, honeybees and energy lines, a little bit more as well to it. And I'm mentioning Dave Cushman's website because some of this is actually on Dave's website. I have to say straight away that this is really only a hypothesis, not confirmed by science. I usually give the presentation in person, but obviously I can't do that. I usually do it in a venue where I do a bit of a demonstration to find lines, and clearly I can't do that. So what I've done is I've adapted it for a virtual presentation. But before that, I'd like to read out a statement on behalf of both BIBBA and myself. As the organiser of the programme of BIBBA webinars, I've tried to provide good, sound, reliable information and advice to help beekeepers of all ability levels to understand, manage and care for their bees better. From the many positive and appreciative comments and emails we've received, it is obvious we've achieved that. I hope the many recordings will provide the beekeeping community with a good resource for many years to come. This webinar is a departure from the main programme. It is based on a hypothesis that is scientifically unproven, yet covers over 10 years of observation by me, with others making similar observations elsewhere. Even though I firmly believe in the existence of energy lines, and I'm usefully using the information I have gleaned since 2009 in my own beekeeping operation, I stress that it is still only a hypothesis. Although this presentation is one of my most popular titles, I never intended to include it in this series because of the nature of it. There have been many requests to include it, to the point where I could no longer resist. Both BIBBA and myself are open-minded, and we should remember that many of the scientific discoveries were made as a result of observation. There is much more to know about honeybees. Only last evening, I watched a webinar by a bee scientist who said we know very little about the honeybee genome. Please treat this webinar as intended, light-hearted, with a bit of humour and no negative reflection on BIBBA. Thank you very much for that. So energy lines, I formally called them ley lines. They may be the same as geopathic stress lines, but I changed my terminology of them because I wasn't sure if they were the same thing or not. And there have been quite a lot of negative comments online, and I'm sure some of you have seen them, about what I've written and spoken about. And I really didn't want to implicate either ley lines or geopathic stress lines. So that's why I changed. Energy may well be the wrong word or term. Anyway, I don't know until somebody does some scientific work on it. Then I simply don't know. So what are energy, or perhaps even ley lines? Quite frankly, I don't know. But these days we've always got to have somebody to blame. So who's that then? Well, it's definitely not me. So who was it then? Well, it might well have been this man called Alfred Watkins, because he, in modern times, discovered, if indeed they were discovered, and he named them ley lines in about 1921, as far as I can gather. Alfred Watkins wrote several books, the first of which was Early British Trackways, which was published in 1922. But the one he's probably most famous for is called The Old Straight Track, which was published in 1925 and is still in print. He couldn't have been too bad a guy, because he was actually a founder member of the Herefordshire Beekeepers Association in 1882. He discovered that some tracks were straight. I assume that's both on the ground and on the map too. I may have an explanation for that later. What he noticed was that some natural and artificial features were also in line. Now, if you think about it, you can actually line anything up if you want to. And I'm not discrediting him at all. Just pointing out that what he may have found may not perhaps have been true. I just don't know. I simply don't know. He never attributed any supernatural significance to Leys at all. And my guess is, but I don't know, he would probably be disappointed that others have since attributed the supernatural side to him. What he did may not have been any more than just a simple visual observation. I really don't know. He may well have discovered something, but didn't know about the energy that myself and others have detected. So I've mentioned a couple of times the hypothesis. So what's a hypothesis? It's basically something that's more than a wild guess, but less than a well-established theory. So that's really what I'm working on for the rest of the presentation. So what are these energy lines then? Well, there's some form of energy that come out of the ground. Are they electrical? Are they magnetic? Don't know, but I may well have a little bit of a clue later on. What I do know is they're straight over long distances, and I've followed some across a 15-acre field, and they're absolutely dead straight. They're not very wide, less than a foot, and probably a lot less than that. They might only be an inch or so wide. I really don't know until there's some sort of metering system set up. We probably won't find out. What I do know is that what I'm detecting is at random. There are all sorts of angles. They're not parallel like Hartmann lines are. They're really any sort of angle, and variable density too. And when I say variable density, where you folk, I'm assuming you're sitting, but where you're sitting, if it's in a reasonable sized room, you could have no energy lines going through there. You could have anything up to half a dozen. It really does vary. There's obviously been little research. Why, I don't know, but I suspect probably the scientific community want to distance themselves. But if that's fine, if that's what they want to do. Now, they're reputed to reach 30,000 feet. That's something I got off the internet. And I put it there for a reason that we may find out or may discuss a little bit later on. What I know is that some creatures are attracted to them and others are repelled, and I'll give you some examples later on. I don't know if it's connected or not, but we do know that settlers and nomads, nomadic people, they pitched their camps where their animals slept. Now, it may just be that perhaps their animals were uncomfortable over energy lines, ley lines, call them what you like. So they slept where there weren't any. And we know that humans certainly are uncomfortable over them. And I'm just guessing that that's the reason. So now for a quick poll. Let's have the first one, please, Richard. And I did say quick.
Okay, try, yeah. Right, first poll. Hopefully you should be able to see that. So the question is, what is your current view of energy lines pre-webinar? Do believe in them, do not believe in them, I don't know. 60% completed. Apologies to those few people watching on YouTube, but if you want to enter in the comments, if you don't mind doing that, do it in the chat, you can do. 90% voted. Stuck at 116. A few more come in. Percentages keep going up and down because people keep joining. Tell me when you want to end it, Roger. We're at
Well, yeah,
about 90. Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Super. And that now. And I'll share those results with you.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, right. Thank you very much indeed. Can we close now, Richard? Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Skepticism. I can understand and I fully respect it because I was a skeptic once, and to a certain degree, I almost still am because I still can't quite understand what's going on. I think it's probably because you can't actually see anything. But on the other hand, you can't see electricity, and that could be a bit dangerous if you assume it isn't there. There is no scientific proof, as I've mentioned. So, of course, people can lay back on that and say, well, there's no scientific proof. No, there isn't. It is easy to find another reason for some of the things I'm going to tell you, even though that may not be proven either. And I've shown people where I think energy lines are, and they've come straight out with it and say things like, oh, that's an underground water pipe, or that's an electricity wire cable, or that's a telephone cable, or something like that. They're quite happy to tell me what it is, but they're quite adamant it's not what I tell them. That's up to them. I haven't got a problem with that, because if it's somebody who's sensible, I actually enjoy discussions with skeptics because it makes me think as well. There's never ever any argument. It's just that people perhaps tell me why they think it's not feasible, and the other way around. So I do enjoy discussions. Now, our knowledge and feel for the natural world, it's actually been lost for centuries, I think, or certainly amongst the more advanced cultures anyway. Why is that? Well, I don't know, but my guess is probably domestication and perhaps religious reasons. I'm not saying that's definitely the case, and I don't want to discuss it anymore. But we don't seem to have the feel for the natural world like the more primitive people do. Who's this lady? This is Judy Knight, one of our members at Whisper Green. She's a beekeeper, and she's got a friend about half a mile away who's got a barn. And in 2009, Judy was asked to remove bees from a barn because they wanted to empty the barn out and I think have a family event. There's a big birthday or something. I can't remember. Doesn't really matter. Anyway, Judy went along to the barn and realised that it was beyond her. And because she is she knew that I was always involved in taking bees from wild places, trees, buildings, and that sort of thing. She asked me if I'd go along. So along I went. There was the end of the barn. And it was obviously there's several colonies there. You can see there's bees here. You can also see there's bees up there as well. Obviously different colonies, so multiple colonies basically. Anyway, we started work, and there's me up the ladder. Look, and when we took the weatherboarding off, this is what we found. There were 3 nests there. The right-hand one had died, by the way. 3 nests there, so they were close together. But there was also the other one that I showed you in the last slide down here at the bottom. So we took all this weatherboarding off, marked it all, and the usual sort of things we do. And it didn't make sense to me because we keep being told that bees spread out, and in human terms, it's presumably to sort of spread the forage out. That sort of thing, excuse me. But to get that number close together just didn't seem sense to me. This is the one on the bottom right-hand side. some of you may have seen this picture several times. I like it because it shows how bees, if they're given the chance, will actually produce comb nice and straight. I always measure combs like this because we're always told that the distance in a natural nest is 35 millimeters. That's not my experience. It's usually between 36 and 38. So it's a bit more. So it's more like what I would call the English narrow spacing rather than the American narrow spacing. Anyway, when we were working on it, around the other side of the barn, and where I've just shown you is this right-hand side. This is the side of the barn, and there were bees looking around, really scouting there. So what I thought I'd do was I'd put a bait hive down there, expecting them to go in there. Did they? No, of course they didn't. And within a couple of days, in came the swarm, and we then removed that one. So this started me thinking, why so many colonies at sort of heavy density? And then for some reason, I can't think why, I remembered that I'd read 20 or more years earlier, read a magazine in a waiting room, could have been the doctor's or a dentist or something of that nature. And it mentioned these lines and that some animals were attracted to them, some weren't. And it just gave a brief mention of bees being attracted to them, which I think probably was what stuck in my mind. And then strangely, I had a great stroke of luck. Within a couple of days, I had an email from Philip Denwood, who was the editor of the BIBBA's Bee Improvement magazine. And he was sent a draft of 3 articles. I am the editor of the website, and he said to me, look, I've been sent these 3. I could use 2 of them, but I don't want to use the other one. Can you use it for the website? It was by a BIBBA member called John Harding. And he was writing that Varroa, he puts his bees over geopathic stress lines because he felt that Varroa didn't like the stress lines. And anyway, this interested me, of course, because of the previous magazine article and the bees in the barn. So I contacted John Harding, found out where he lived, and it was Stourbridge in West Midlands. Well, it just so happened that I was booked to do a talk in the northwest somewhere. I can't remember, Lancashire or Cheshire, somewhere up that way. And I literally went within a few miles of John Harding. So I asked if I could go in and see him. Yep, okay. When I got there, he was a commercial beekeeper with about 300 colonies. And he keeps them all on what he calls geopathic stress lines because he thinks that Varroa disliked them, but bees like them. And he hadn't at that point treated for Varroa for 18 years. He showed me about 10 or a dozen colonies in his garden, I suppose. And he showed me how he picked up the energy lines with divining. So he handed his rods to me and said, you have a go. So he told me what he did. And lo and behold, I detected the same lines as John. Now, I know it's easy at this point to say, oh, yeah, but I knew where they were. Yes, I did know where they were. But when I'm shown something like this, I try to be serious about it. And I considered I was. Anyway, John also told me that oak and elder trees grow on geopathic stress lines. Again, I will mention these later on. Soon after that, John had a book published called An Holistic Way in Saving the Honeybee. I have to say, I don't want to discredit it, but it is not a particularly good and easy read. It's not, in my opinion, set out very well. It's just bits and pieces, all sorts of different fonts and those sort of things. I've spoken to John about it, and he said, "Well, you know, that's me. That's how I do things. That's absolutely fine." But I think he would have been taken more seriously if he'd have written it in a normal way. But that's not been critical at all, because I do things that others will disagree with. Anyway, when I got back home, I made up some rods, and I went to the barn and checked it. And would you believe I found energy lines all over it, including right down the middle of the wall of the end wall that I showed you with that was opened up. So we cleared out all those bees, and then on the 16th of July, only a couple of months later, we found that, we were told that another swarm had gone in. Obviously, that one had been in there several weeks, but it had gone in the same cavity. And one or two strange things happened. There it is in the other end, but although the combs were in the same line as the original, they hadn't used the same area, and that puzzled me just a bit. We did at the time. Anyway, that was us taking it out. Now, at that barn in 2009, Judy was involved in removing or taking swarms away from on 11 occasions. So the barn was a bit like a magnet. And Judy has several calls every year. In fact, I think we've got one in there now that's overwintered. And this is one of them in 2012, another one we removed. Now, since 2009, and I'll say now that I'm more than happy to credit John Harding with getting me involved in this. I'm more than happy to do that. It's not something I discovered. John told me about it. Since 2009, every swarm that's clustered that I know about, every free living nest site, so it could be a tree or a building or whatever, or sites of the above where either somebody else has removed something, or I did years ago, took bees out of a building or something like that, and where empty hives have had swarms go in, such as bait hives. Every one of them has at least 4 energy lines cross. Now, as I say, they are at random. There's usually more, but 4 is the absolute minimum that I tend to come across. Now, that is hundreds of positives, and I do mean hundreds of positives, absolutely no negatives whatsoever. I now get to the point where if I go to another beekeeper and they say, "Oh, I always have swarms settled in the same place," I can usually tell them where it is. I say to them, "Look, don't tell me. I'll get the rods out of the car and I'll check up." And I expect there's people in the who are listening tonight who will verify that. So here's a couple of swarms that I was called out to. I now check absolutely everything, and as I say, there's every one of them has got energy lines that go through them. It's really where they cross, not just on one line. It's where they cross, and I think that's significant, which I'll tell you about later on. Now, I get called out normally to about 30 swarms a year. Last year it was only half a dozen, but I'm expecting this year to have more, especially the number of scout bees that are around my piles of supers. I was called out to a place called Barkfold Manor, which is in Curdford, which is 5-6 miles from me, I suppose. We've got a swarm on our lawn. So round I go, and I found this. So it was on the lawn. 30, 40 yards from the house, I suppose. So I asked them if there were any bees in the house. No, there weren't. Well, it was a bright sunny day. So I had a look along the walls and look roof line, that sort of thing, like you normally do if you're looking for bees or even wasps in buildings. And I thought, well, where did this come from then? Anyway, I got my rods out, and there were, I can't remember how many went through, 6 or 8 energy lines went through there. And one of them lined up with an oak tree about 100 yards away. So I walked to the oak tree, and would you believe there's bees coming in and out of a hole there? So I think what had happened was, as we quite often get these days, a queen with damaged or deformed wings or whatever, and for some reason, sometimes the bees chew the wings off them. Anyway, I think the queen had just dropped to the ground and walked along the ground and along one of the energy lines that was going through their nest until they came to a position where lots of others crossed. And that's all I can think of. So how do I do it then? Well, it's divining. And it does vary with the person. And I'd never, ever even attempted divining until John showed me. It does vary with the person. Some people can use just one rod. I've got to use 2, otherwise they don't work. Some people can use short ones. Others, they've got to be long ones. I think it depends with the who the person is. I concentrate on what I'm looking for. So if I'm looking for energy lines, that's what I concentrate on, and I'll keep repeating energy lines, energy lines, energy lines. If I'm looking for, I don't know, an apple tree, let's say, then I'll concentrate on the apple tree. I have found lots of things for people, including one of our members' wedding rings at Dunner's the Whisper Green teaching acre at Dunner's farm, and we got, I don't know, half an acre there. So I found that for her. So what I do is I hold the rods firmly and level. Now, some people put them in big biro outers. I don't do that because I find they just move around. I hold them very firm. They're L-shaped, as I'll show you in a minute, and I turn them on the side like so. Turn them on the side like that, and I hold them so tight that the rod doesn't bend down. So I'm holding them really tight. I need to walk slowly because they're not very wide, and you can just walk through them if you go too fast. Now, I'm not an experienced diviner. I don't do it full time like some people do. I think you can, well, not full time, but regularly. That's what I mean. I think you can get better at it if you practice. The old adage, practice makes perfect. So I don't practice enough. Now I can find some other things, including our members' wedding ring. I can ask them questions as well, but I can't use either a twig or a pendulum, and I have tried, but I can't do it. So it really is a personal thing. So here's me at Gormanston in Ireland, and you see that big lawn there, that's only part of it. Gormanston is the Irish summer school that the Federation of Irish Beekeepers have been running for 60 or 70 years now, I suppose. And if you get the opportunity to go there, it's a really good beekeeping week. There's loads and loads of things to see and do. Anyway, these rods are made out of steel. Originally, they were coat hangers, but now I make them out of fencing wire, and they are steel. And I said earlier that possibly these lines are magnetic. Well, I've made them out of aluminium, and they don't work. Peter Jenkins, who's probably listening here, he made me some out of brass, and they don't work either. So that makes me think that they are magnetic. So you've got to concentrate, or I've got to concentrate quite hard. So people talking to me and me chatting with others and laughing and joking and that sort of thing, as some people do when they're trying it out. Just simply doesn't work. So I just walk slowly, and the rods will move when I get a signal. Here's a place called Heather's Farm, which is about 3 miles from me, I suppose, and I regularly get called out to swarms there. Over here is an extension to the house, which there's a bathroom, but there's a double wall. And on the right-hand side here, there's been a colony of bees in there for 20 years, I should think. Certainly to my knowledge, 20 years. And I get called out every 2 or 3 years. We got another swarm for you. Anyway, this particular one, they said it's on the drive. So along I go, and a bit like the one at Barkfold Manor, there it was in a circle on the ground with a queen right in the middle of it. Now, what had happened was the queen again had damaged wings. What had happened was that they'd come out the side of the building, dropped down to the ground, walked along energy lines until they came to others. And that particular point, there were at least 8 going through that point. And there's my divining rods. There's a row of ornamental hornbeam trees, like a little avenue really, down the side here. And the first one is where I always get a swarm from exactly the same place. And over the years, I must have taken 4 or 5, or might even be more, swarms out of exactly the same place. This is a strange one. I was hanging my washing out one morning. It was just before 9 o'clock, and I heard this buzz come over the top of my house, and there's a swarm of bees. Now, we're told that bees don't fly at that time, or swarms don't fly at that time. Oh, yes, they do. Anyway, went straight down my garden and into this hive that was actually on top of another one. There's a colony in this one underneath, and that particular spot is where I regularly pick up swarms. There's about 5 or 6 energy lines going through there. Now, that hive was a dead colony, and I brought it in from an out apiary after 9 o'clock the previous night. So that had been scouted out, I assume, by the swarm in the morning, and they'd come in, and that was on an energy line that went right up through my garden, right over the top of my house, or right through my house as well. Worcestershire Commercial Beekeeper invited me to give a talk to Worcestershire Beekeepers Association, and we had chatting about this, and he knew that I was involved in this, and he said there were several places that I regularly get swarms, he said, and see if you can find them. So just here, and this is what the buckets are about, there were lines going through which went right on the edge of the truck. And he told me that he'd taken, in the last couple of years, he'd taken, I think, 4 swarms off that very point. So there's something that there's something going on. Anyway, at the back of his place, there was this little paddock, and he said, well, there's 3 spots on that hedge down there. He said, see if that I always get swarms on. He said, see if you can find them. Well, I actually found 2 of them. I didn't find the other one, but I guess I could have done if I was spent a little bit more time. I know a man called Mike Edwards quite well, and Mike is one of the country's leading experts on solitary bees, but he doesn't know much about honeybees. So if he gets involved in honeybees, he just hands it over to me. And Mike does quite a bit of consultancy work for planners and those sort of people. And he said to me that, or he phoned me up and he said, look, I've been asked to look at a bee's nest in a tree in a place called Whisper Green, which is some village 3 miles from me, I suppose. So he said, do you mind going and have a look? So I went along, and it wasn't a tree, all right, but it was a poplar tree that had blown over some time ago. Anyway, this was in February, and this is what I found in the tree. It was obviously dead, and had been dead for some time. Now, there were 13 energy lines going through that one, with all these buildings out the back here, and there's a lot more to the right, and further on, there's a whole council estate behind that White House there. You'd think that they would find somewhere else to find a nest other than underneath a tree like that. Now, when you get nests made out in the open like this, there's always a high number of energy lines. And my guess is, but I don't know, that they work on the strength of them. And perhaps I can give you a little bit of a clue to my thinking a little bit later on this. Why do swarms abscond? It's easy enough to say, oh, well, they don't like the hive, or they found somewhere else, or whatever. Yeah, they might well do. But they only usually abscond when hived by a beekeeper. The only time I've ever come across a swarm that's absconded was when they went into a flat roof on a very hot day, and out they came very, very quickly. My guess is it's because they're not actually on energy lines, so they feel uncomfortable, so they try and find somewhere else. I may be wrong, but I certainly put my bait hives on energy lines, and they don't abscond. So here's typical sort of bait hive, and like I just said, I put mine on where at least 4 energy lines cross, like the one where the colony went in that came over my house before 9 o'clock one morning. This is the building, station building from Selham Station, which was on the Pulborough to Midhurst line, closed in, I think, 1955. We were called out because they wanted to renovate the building, and there were 3 colonies of bees in that area of wall there. Now, this is 4 years after I first became aware of this situation, and I started wondering why bees built combs in certain directions. And I know there's a bit of documentation as to why they do it, but I sort of had the idea that perhaps the bees were building combs in line with the energy line. So that lot there was completely covered up. And what I did was I got a piece of paper and I mapped where the energy lines were. And in fact, there was one going all the way down this wall, right down the middle. So that was common to all 3 nests. Anyway, I mapped on a piece of paper which way they were. And of course, don't forget, there's going to be 4 or 5 going through each one of these. So I can only predict it's going to be this way, or this way. That's the first time I predicted comb direction, and all 3 of those were in line with one of the lines that I've drawn on this a bit of paper. This is back to Gormanston, and on 2 or 3 occasions I've done an evening demonstration out on the lawn, trying to find the lines. And what I do is find a line and put these fencing stakes, electric fencing stakes, in where the energy lines are, and then we work out where they cross and see how many others go through there at the same time. And we got different colour ones of these, and it's actually quite interesting because I've actually learned quite a bit from it as well. Gormanston Summer School, I told you about that. Anyway, of course I had people say to me, "Oh yeah, but you know where the other one or the other stake is, so therefore you're just going to put it in line." So I was effectively blinkered by these two chaps. I just couldn't see, and you can see that I can't see. And we put them in line across the lawn. That one there, I know, is not in line, but that's going the other way. So you can see there's one, two, there's at least three there, and a couple behind me as well. So oak trees are usually on energy lines. Why is that? Well, we know that jays bury acorns, and it's easy enough to think, oh, they must be really clever jays remembering where they put the acorns. Well, is it because they actually bury them where the energy lines are? So during the winter, when they get a bit hungry, they think to themselves, "Oh, we'll find some energy lines, and we know there's going to be an acorn, or there's going to be a chance of an acorn there." I don't know. I'm just guessing, really. But what I do know is that a lot of ancient hedges are often on energy lines, and I guess what's happened in the past is that when the assarting happened, they just happened to pick trees that were perhaps in line. So that's where they would plant their hedges. I don't know. It really is just guesswork. Now, in this country, bees naturally live in trees. And here's one with a bee's nest in. It's not there where you think, it's up there. So that's the sort of tree and the size tree that I've taken many, well, in fact, several hundreds of colonies out of. Could it be that bees nest in hollow trees, which we know, often oaks? Yes, you do get others as well. I've had cherry, ash, beech. I've had the whole range, but predominantly they are oaks. And because they're living on several energy lines, when they leave the nest or even coming back, I'm asking myself, do they actually use them for navigation purposes? I'm not at all discrediting von Frisch's discoveries, but I'm wondering if perhaps this is a sort of bolt-on to what von Frisch discovered. I don't know. Perhaps somebody at some stage could do some work on that. But what about drone assemblies? We're told that they're in exactly the same place year after year after year. There's supposed to have been records going back several hundred years. Whether that is correct or not, I don't know. I've only ever, in 56 years of beekeeping, nearly 57, I've only ever come across two drone assemblies. One was at a place called Palfrey Farm there in a little district called Ebenow, which is near Petworth in West Sussex. Soon after I started keeping bees, so well over 50 years ago. The other one was in 2012 in July, and this was in Hampshire. There's a hill called North Hill, which is a beautiful nature reserve, and it's an old site, an old chalk working. It goes right back to medieval times, and you can see there's a chalk pit here. That's my friend Jackie there. And this, if anybody can remember or even wants to remember, is my old dog Meg. Anyway, there's lots of little holes like or pits like this, and this is a natural ground area. Over the other side of that is another one of these, and we went there looking for orchids. And in fact, we found 9 on this particular day. I checked up with Jackie last night, but that doesn't matter too much. Anyway, we came out of this other pit, stood up here, and I said to Jackie, "It's a swarm of bees." And we looked around and we couldn't really see them. Anyway, it soon dawned on me that it was a drone assembly. And there's Jackie looking up at the drone assembly, which was here. Now, Jackie's 5'6", so that pit has got to be 5 foot what, 12, perhaps 14 foot deep. There she is looking at the drones. It just so happened that I had my divining rods on me. The car was parked a quarter of a mile away, I suppose. And out came the divining rods, and there were at least 11 energy lines going through that particular spot. Now, I know we're told of all sorts of things that happen, all sorts of reasons why drone assemblies or drone congregation areas, call them what you like, why they form, up currents and all sorts of things like that. And the queens of the drones follows hedge lines and all sorts of things like that to go to these sites. Now, of course, hedge lines, if they were, they're not natural, of course, but if they are old hedge lines and they're on energy lines, perhaps they're flying down the energy lines to get to the drone assemblies, drone congregation areas. And with perhaps a lot of energy lines going into there, perhaps that's why you can get a lot of drones in the drone congregation area. I don't know. I am just guessing. Going away from that just a little bit, on that day, I said that we found 9 different species of orchids. We were expecting to find frog orchids, but we just didn't see any. And then Jackie said, well, get your rods out and see if you can detect them. And we very soon found this pair here. And overall, we found about 80. So if anyone knows anything about orchids, they're actually very small and they're very, very variable in colour and height as well. What I do know is that wasps, hornets and bumblebees do not nest on energy lines. I have never come across any that do. And of course, living in the rural area, I know where a lot of these are. They just simply don't do it. So, but on the other hand, they don't fly very far. Not as far as honeybees do. This is the field opposite me. This was in 2012. There's a line of oaks down there, which is on an old ancient hedge line. It's basically the field's gone derelict, basically because somebody bought it hoping to put houses up on there, and it's still in a similar condition to this, and it's looking very much as if, unfortunately, they're going to get their way anyway. So it's very much like that. So there's a lot of young oaks that are grown up. There's hawthorns, there's spindles, there's all sorts of things like that. And there of course is Nell. She's got to get in most pictures. This is 3 years later from almost the same spot. Now I did check, and right over that side where the young trees are, there's an awful lot of energy lines there. Now, I know it's easy to say, well, these young trees are fairly close to the older trees that are shedding their acorns, all sorts of things like this. But there are a few energy lines over this side, and there's no oaks either. Now, there's still no oaks. There's poor Nell. She was sitting there for nearly 3 years, look. Anyway, where the reason that I put her in the photograph was to show roughly where Nell was. So I'm now standing in that sort of position, and I'm looking to the right of the two views that you've just seen. There is a path that's used by locals. And here is a badger track that's actually on an energy line. Now look how reasonably straight it is. The local badger set is up in the woods, up here, up behind, well, quarter of a mile away, I suppose. something like that. Now, my guess is that this energy line goes straight up, straight over that hill into the distance. How far it goes, I've absolutely no idea. So let's just look at badgers. We know they've got poor eyesight, and we also know that they've used, or country people do, that they use the same track for years and years and years and years and years. And I've just pointed out the set that is fairly close to me, and there's tracks obviously coming from the set, and all of those are on energy lines. And if they change direction, they change over a point. Do they follow your energy lines? Yes, I think they do. Now, presumably, most people know what badgers' dung pits or latrines are. In human terms, we think they're using them as territory marking. Whether they actually are or not, I don't know. But there's what they've left behind. And that particular one, there were at least 9 energy lines going through it. Mentioned earlier about elder trees growing on geopathic stress lines, energy lines, call it what you like. Elderberries are, during the autumn, are a major part of the badger's diet. So it could just be that that they drop them in the dung pits of latrines, and also usually around badger sets, there are a lot of elder trees as well. Badgers often use footpaths, and I'm sure if you are country folk, you may well have gone out at night, or dusk rather, and met a badger coming the other way. I have on several occasions. So it's known that they use footpaths. Could it just be that the footpath was made in the past where the badgers have made the clearing? I don't know. Did they then develop into the drovers' roads? I don't know where you folk live, but certainly in the south, we've got drovers' roads where they used to move animals around or even take them to market. And of course, they did it on foot. Did they use tracks that were made by badgers? What about Roman roads? They're straight as well. Here's Stane Street, which is a road that goes from Chichester to London, a distance of 50-some odd miles, I think 56 or 58 miles, something like that. It's said to be straight. It is in various places, but if you draw a straight line between start and finish, it actually goes over 56 miles. It goes 6 miles off the straight. So perhaps they've been using what was already there. But this particular point, this is just coming up to the South Downs from the Scarp Slope between a place called Eartham Woods. But there is an energy line goes right through the middle of it. We know they're straight, or in sections they're straight. Let's put it that way. Everyone I've come across have been, there's an energy line going right down the middle of them. And did Romans just simply follow what was already there, but they've been given credit for something that they did actually by accident? And were they animal tracks? Were they perhaps badger tracks? Or they could well, I suppose, have been Iron Age tracks. I really don't know. So what about creatures with long migrations, such as animals and birds? Could it be that their leaders are more sensitive? Now, I played, I live in a village called Slinfold, which is about 12, 15 miles from Gatwick. And Slinfold is in a triangle surrounded by 3 main roads. It's easy enough to get to Gatwick, but the village itself is actually quite quiet, so it's quite attractive to people who work in the airline industry. And I happened to play cricket one day with 4 airline pilots, and one airline pilot said he saw a flock of geese at 20,000 feet, and they had a bit of a chat about that. Now, at 20,000 feet, it's going to be quite difficult for geese to read the road signs. Now, could it be that they're literally just following energy lines, and perhaps the 30,000 feet that I mentioned earlier isn't insignificant? One of my dogs, Nell. If I go to a beekeeping event, sometimes I have to stay overnight. She generally stays in a car, no trouble at all. But some people are quite happy for her to stay inside. They normally put her down on her own rug by the side of the bed, and that's how she lays. Absolutely no problem at all. She doesn't get off the rug or anything. I went to Norfolk, stayed on a farm there, and I put Nell down by the bed, and after a minute or so, up she got and moved away. So I brought her back, same again, brought her back, did this 2 or 3 times, and I don't normally get angry with her, but where she went was under this a piece of furniture and laid on the ground there. And I kept thinking, what's wrong with her? I thought she wasn't feeling very well or anything like that. Anyway, all of a sudden I thought to myself, I wonder. And the following morning, I got my divining rods out of the car, and I found there were 9 energy lines going through that spot. She clearly, or seemed clear to me, decided that she was uncomfortable there, so she went and laid somewhere else. Well, she stayed all night, no problem at all. So back to bees now. We had a couple of members at Whisper Green, and they had a wood in their clearing, and in their wood they had their bees, and there's more than this lot here. There was about 15 colonies, I suppose. Anyway, they said to me one day, do you mind coming and divining and tell us where we should be putting our bait hives? So yeah, off I went. And it's one of the areas where there was virtually no lines at all, and I had to tell them. But I said, what I have found is there's one going right through the middle of those 4 hives there. And they both looked at each other, and they said to me, it's strange, but all those 4 hives always give us more honey than the others do. So I'm not saying there is anything in it. It's just something else that that adds to the mystery. This is a teaching apiary of Beekeeping Association, and I stayed overnight with the secretary, and I had a bit of a chat about energy lines, and I checked his garden, told him where to put or where I would put bait hives, and he said, well, let's go early, go down to the teaching apiary, and you can see what there is there. So I did. We got down there nice and early, and I found 3 areas with quite a lot of lines going through. One was to the left here, sort of more or less behind me to the left, and there were 2 down the other end. So he said, well, what should we mark them with? And we didn't have very much. But behind me, where I'm standing, was a shed, and there was some sawn up logs. So we said, well, okay, we've put a log on each one. So 1 here, 2 up the other end. And then the people started coming, and the beekeepers, and we were chatting about what happened, and then a couple turned up, and the lady said, well, I put my bees where I feel that they should go. What do you mean? Well, she said, I just sort of walk around, and all of a sudden I feel this is a place where the bees ought to go. She said, oh, you know, it's just a feel sort of thing. So the secretary said, well, have a wander around here and see what you think. Anyway, she came back after 10 minutes and she said, well, there's 2 places up the other end, she said, and there's a couple of bits of wood down on each one. So, you know, she did not see what I'd done. Absolutely no way. Anyway, that is enough from me. I think it's a mystery. I really do. But perhaps there is a research opportunity for someone. So as I understand it, there's at least one scientist listening. So if you know anybody in the scientific community who's a bit short of something to do, if you can find some money, or perhaps we can crowdfund it, we'll give it a crack. So that's it. Time for another poll. Richard.
Okay, so next poll, poll number 3, post launched that. So what is your belief now? So post webinar, I do believe, I do not believe, I still don't know.
Can I fill it in? What we don't know is if we're still going to get the same 90%. So it's not a scientific experiment.
It's not, no.
We won't be able to use this. This is going to be interesting because they're all going to put, I still don't know.
Oh, it is interesting, Roger. 86% have voted. Couple more moments.
Oh, they're all asleep.
Okay, everybody done? We'll finish there then. Okay.
Yeah, it's a, yeah.
So 59% previously said do believe.
Yep.
8% said that they did not.
Okay.
And 34% said they didn't know. So there has been some shift.
Yeah, I better state now, this is not an attempt to try and convert anybody or anything like that. It really is just a bit of fun. As of course, beekeeping is. And that's it. Thank you very much. Any questions? I'm more than happy to answer.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Roger.
Yeah, you want me to come out of this?
Yeah, if you will.
Unlikely to go back.
Excellent. So let's have a look at the questions. You've got a testimony to start with. I have bees in quite a few out apiaries, most of which Roger has scanned for energy lines. Some out apiaries had few or no energy lines detected, whilst others had many. Due to the long, wet, damp winter we've just had, my percentage losses have been the worst in the last 40 years. All of my apiaries have a similar aspect in terms of elevation, shelter, etc. And all my bees are similar. However, the apiaries with the most energy lines have had little or no losses, whilst 2 apiaries where Roger did not detect any energy lines have almost been totally wiped out. Could it be that, as Albert Einstein said, energy lines are a force yet undiscovered by man? Could this explain my losses?
I don't know anything about Albert Einstein. Not very much anyway.
That's an interesting one though, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's a little bit like the like our Whisper Green members with the 4 colonies in line.
Yeah. I think you probably answered this as you went through your presentation, but just in a nutshell, what are energy lines?
I really don't know. I suspect they're magnetic because brass rods don't work and aluminium rods don't work. But I've tried to find things with brass and aluminium rods, the same as the steel rods, and I'm able to. So it's not that I can't use aluminium or steel. My guess is that there's something to do with magnetism.
But pathways that you've found where these pathways cross, you found, as you said at the beginning, swarms and bait hives and all those things occur.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I can't use aluminium or brass to pick them up. It's got to be steel.
Okay, super.
I doubt if anybody who uses a twig will be able to pick them up. Some people can use plastic. It's things like drinking straws and bent plastic knitting needles and that sort of thing. Yeah, they wouldn't work.
Right. Joy and David say that they like the idea of live polling. However, bias is likely in this case because believers are more likely to be watching. I think we agree.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No problem with that.
Yeah. Rob wants to know if you know somebody called Mackenzie Crook.
No.
I don't know why that is, or that's the only bit of the question. Somebody says, I think it's fascinating. I wonder what Tom Seeley would make of this. For instance, with swarms, he seems very open-minded as well.
I've spoken to Tom Seeley. He's a skeptic,
right?
Which I think you would expect, because being a scientist, he will want proof.
Yeah.
And I really don't know if somebody, let's say, investigated this. I don't really know what expertise is needed. I mean, if there were any sort of meters or anything, then I should think they'd be in existence.
It's interesting that because
sorry, can I just leap in? You tend to hear of all sorts and read all sorts of things online about megahertz and all sorts of strengths and that sort of thing. I think that needs to be no, not treated with suspicion, but if somebody's measured it, they must have used some sort of meter. Or if that's the case, then why aren't other people using the same sort of meters? Yeah, so sorry I butted in. Yeah.
Oh no, I know that on the website it had said that this had been requested by me, and the reason that I had taken an interest in it is because I saw you speak in a double billing with Tom Seeley at the National Honey Show a few years ago, and you touched on energy lines in what you were talking about, free living colonies, and I was sat next to some grumpy old thing in the audience who grumbled when you'd mentioned it. And ever since then, I've thought, I want to know more about this, because I don't want some grumbly old man to be the thing that makes me decide whether or not this is something that I believe in personally, which is why I wanted you to do it. Anyway.
I'll no disrespect to Tom Seeley, but being a scientist, he's got to make sure that things are correct. And I guess being Tom, he probably gets all sorts of people contacting him about this, that, or something else, and some of them, well, won't say off the wall, because I've got to be a bit careful there, haven't I? But some of them are, let's say, outrageous and may not even understand what they're trying to say. So he must get an awful lot of emails and messages, and people want to talk to him and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Alan asks 2 questions. Are these energy lines always straight in a valley? And do you sleep on an energy line?
No, I don't sleep on an energy line. I know people who have, and on a couple of occasions, and they've had bad backs and that sort of thing. and I suggested they move to the other side of the room, and then they tell me they've got better. Interestingly, we used to have a member at Whisper Green, and when we start the meeting, we set chairs out, and she complained that in one particular chair, or where one was, that she just felt ever so tired, and out came the rods, and yes, there were 6 or 8 energy lines going through that particular position. So she must have been quite sensitive.
Mm.
Yeah.
And energy lines always straight, say, in a valley?
I've never thought about this. Of course, the thing is, if I go out and have a look, it's usually a flat field or something like that, because it's generally big. I've never really thought about this. My guess is that it would be that they would be.
Maria says that your friend Jackie is very lucky to take part in your expeditions. I'm not quite sure.
That reminds me. Thank you very much indeed, Jackie. No, was it? No,
Maria.
No. Yeah, right. Nor Hill is within a mile or two of a village called Selborne in Hampshire. Now, Selborne was where Gilbert White was the vicar, and he wrote that book, which has become a classic, The Natural History of Selborne, where he mentions drone congregation areas, although he doesn't say that's what it is, but it's clear that's what it is. It's probably not the same one, but yeah. Thanks for reminding me. Sorry, what did Maria say?
Oh, she said that your friend was lucky to join you on your expeditions.
Yeah.
I said lucky probably wasn't the right word for it, but she also says, would you like to find spots with 4 energy lines crossing? Could you please recommend a good website where they give you tips to make your rods and practice?
No, I can't really.
Can you go over your rods? Because that's of interest to me, actually.
I've actually got one here. I don't know whether you can see that.
Yeah.
There's one.
So just a piece of steel. And how long is the handle part, would you reckon?
This has not been rearranged.
Up a bit.
Up a bit, yeah. 5 3/4 inches, but I just got them and I bent them and I cut them. So 5 3/4 inches, and going the other way is
on the length
16 and a half.
Right.
But they're mine, and I hold them so tight that if I turn sideways, they don't go down. So I'm holding them really tight. If I didn't hold them very tight, they go down like that. So whatever the force is moving these around. Otherwise, if I wasn't holding very tightly, they would do that.
And as you cross over an energy line, what feedback are you getting from the rods?
These just move slowly like that.
Away from each other, or towards the direction
with me, and I don't know if it's my brain or not, but they generally move to the right with me. If I turn around and came back the other way, they'd still move to the right. So it's not like something that's flowing.
Right. And as it moves, is that you over the top of the energy line, or
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Now I can look down, and I put a mark in the ground, or a little stone, or a bit of twig, or something like that. Go around the other side, and it's over the top again. So that's why I say they're not very wide.
Right.
They're certainly not I'd put less than 12 inches. That was don't forget, I've been doing this for some time, so that was a relic from one of the earlier ones. I really ought to change that now because I'm giving the wrong impression.
That answers Linda's question about how wide are the lines anyway, so that's good.
Yeah, it's almost curtain. Probably if they are discovered, I think they're probably going to be found an inch wide and no more than that. Now, what I didn't say was that I believe they're different strengths, if indeed strength is the right word, because where the bees build a comb in one line, I've played around and done all sorts of things. I've put another box over the top of where a previous one's been, and they usually build in the same line. They don't pick on one of the other ones. Now, as it's a natural thing, that is quite understandable, I think.
Andrew can't wait to get his rods out. His wife's a dowser, so he's already a believer. Interesting. Can you please elaborate on what you mean by there being multiple energy lines crossing in one place, like the 9 under Nell? Sorry.
Yeah, under Nell.
Yes,
yeah, by the bed. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, what I do is I walk one way, and what I find is that I pick them up best where they're going at 90 degrees to me. And I think probably 20 degrees out of that, perhaps 20, 30 degrees out of that, I can't pick them up so well. So what I do is I walk in one direction, and then I move around a bit and walk in another direction, and then a bit more and walk in another direction. So that probably I'm in a circle, I'm doing 6, 8 or 10 different directions. And then I pick them up, and I will find something like a piece of wood or a stone or something like that, and put it on the ground, and then find another one that goes the other way, and then I move it to where they cross, and that might be it. 2 cross, and that might be it. But then I will find another one where another one goes through. So it's 3, and then it builds up. And the most I've ever found in one place is 23. And that was on a farm 4 or 5 miles from me, going through an oak tree, which wasn't that old. It was probably 30 years old, I would think. But it's an oak tree in the edge of a wood. But usually they're 10 or less, 4, 5, 6, that sort of number.
Rob says magnetic lines do not cross.
How does he know?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't magnetic lines cross? Anyway, there's some reason why steel works and brass and aluminium don't.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can think of is magnetic.
Karen asks what happens when you to the rods when you tell that there are lines, and you've covered that.
Yeah, move. No.
Yeah. Most people use the rods. Can most people use the rods, or is there a knack to it?
No, I think it's because I think you've got to be deadly serious and you've got to concentrate. I've seen people, I can't do it. Forget it. You've lost it. You've really got to concentrate. See my face in Gormanston. I'm really concentrating on what I'm looking for. Now I haven't spoken to many really serious diviners, dowsers. They call them dowsers in the States, don't they? About it. So all I'm doing is what I'm learning as I go along.
Pat says, you said you held the rods sideways, but in the photographs that you showed, you were holding them vertically.
No, I hold them like that.
Yeah.
The only reason I've moved them sideways was to show that how
tight you were holding the rod.
How tight, yeah.
Right, okay.
Like that's the only reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carry on.
Thank you. I thought I was the only one that was interested in this. I use both a pendulum and dowsing rods, and started mapping energy lines in my garden during lockdown. Swarms have definitely settled on the energy lines. That person says.
Okay.
How do you know when you have found an energy line? Do the rods cross? You've said they move to the right for you.
To the right. Yeah. I hold them. I haven't got the other one here, but I hold them that far apart, 6 inches, 8 inches, something like that. Now, if I hold them a lot wider, they both come inwards. Both come inwards.
Still, when you cross over an energy line.
Yeah.
When the chap that taught you, how did the rods behave for him? Sorry, I'm hijacking the questions here.
Well, he held them about the same distance apart as I did, and I can't remember whether they went one way or the other or both. I don't know. When I did some beekeeping teaching out in the United States, the person I stayed with, he was quite a serious dowser, and he used much shorter rods than me, probably about half the length. Yeah, about half the length as me, and his came inwards, but he's quite serious. He uses a pendulum as well. In fact, only yesterday he sent me an email, and he gave me a pendulum, and he suggested that I use it. Well, I've tried, and I struggle with it. But I have seen people use pendulums, and they definitely work for some people anyway.
Peter says, I use energy lines to detect sites for hives and bait hives. I'm just wondering, do bees prefer to build comb in any particular orientation to the energy line?
Well, I think I've covered that. I think probably they're best in line with one of them, but until you can get a natural comb, it's difficult to say which ones the bees would prefer.
Right.
When take the one that I showed with the 8 or 10 combs looking towards you. In looking at it in human terms, with the energy line going right down through the middle of the wall, you would think that the bees would use the longest option, but they didn't. They chose to use one at an angle, and I don't know what that angle was, 30 degrees, I suppose, something like that.
Ross wants to know if you know the difference between water divining and energy line divining.
Yeah, I've done water divining. I also, I'm afraid, had to tell 4 different gangs of the water board, local water board, where a leak was a few weeks ago, and they couldn't find it with all this sophisticated equipment. And I told them where it was, and well, no. In the end, that's where it was. But that I think is a different thing.
Yeah. Somebody asks, do you have to use 2 rods or one work? I think you said at the beginning it depends on the person.
Yeah, very much so. I've tried to use. Some people put these in burrows, you know, the outside of the burrow, but I find they just sway around all over the place, and the wind actually blows them as well. That's what I find. Now, Judy Knight that I showed, her father was a farmer, and he was a diviner, and he used burrows, houses, you know, burrow cases, big burrow cases.
Yeah. Trevor says, do energy lines run in the direction the rods point? Also, do both rods point in the same direction? And I think you've said yours go right as you cross over the energy line.
Yeah. Now, one thing I haven't said is that if I hold those 2 rods and I actually walk along the energy line, whoops, sorry. Yeah. If I walk along the energy line, the rods will keep me on it. So if I deliberately walk off, they will pull me back until I'm over the line again, and then they'll straighten up. And if I go over the line, they'll go the other way. So I can follow a line. I could go in line with it. Now, I have been fooled on occasions because I mentioned that I sometimes go across big fields. And sometimes these lines they're not out and out parallel, but they're very close. And I've been across some fields, and I come across, I put a stake in the ground, and it doesn't line up with anything else. And I look down, and it's sort of 2 or 3 feet out. But I find that there's another line that's almost parallel, but it sort of slightly crosses over like that. So if I go another couple of 3 feet, I'll pick the original one up.
Jonathan says, if I was to make rods out of everyday objects in the house, what would I use? Is copper wire around sticks any good? Should I use something that is magnetic like coat hangers?
Well, I've found that it's only steel rods that work. I don't know if I mentioned it or not. It was actually Peter Jenkins who made me some brass ones. And we took them out to one of his apiaries, and they just didn't work. I couldn't get them to work.
Linda says, have you noticed that there are more crossing points in the country rather than in towns, or is there any difference?
No, I really don't think it matters very much. I mentioned that in one venue, I couldn't find any. And that was a place called I think it was something like the Abbey Centre in Northampton. And I go talk to the Northamptonshire beekeepers, and I got rather embarrassed. I couldn't find one inside the hall at all. Yet went out in the car park that incidentally was surrounded by oak trees, and there were masses of them. So that was only, I don't know, 30 yards away, I suppose. So I know, and I really don't know what's going on. I'm surprised nobody else does. Perhaps it's just me. No idea. Yeah, it's just me.
I'm just laughing at this one. Have you ever used metric divining rods on the continent? Would inch ones work there because of Brexit? Peter Jenkins says. Thanks, pal. Roger says.
You try and put something on serious, and there's always some clown that wants to degrade it.
Do you think that bees are more content when situated on energy lines, such as in a hive?
Well, I don't think bees are more contented or less contented. I think they just poke up with what they're given. My own personal view is that a lot of research needs to be done on this, because I'm absolutely convinced that there is something there, and there's probably a lot more that we don't know. A lot more to discover. One of the things really is John Harding's view about Varroa. I mean, there are people about who can work out where they where to put the colonies. If there was a sort of experiment done where, I don't know, let's say 10 colonies on energy lines, 10 off energy lines. Let's see what happens to the bees. I think it would be quite easy to set up, and it could be a sort of citizen science project. I don't know how it would need to work, whether it would need to be done under the auspices of a scientific community or not. I don't know, university or whatever. They presumably would need quite a bit of funding. But as I mentioned, that I would think we could get crowdfunding for this.
Okay, I'm just mindful of the time because we've.
We got Tony on next, haven't we?
Rob sent me a lovely physics equation for why magnetic fields lines don't cross. So I'll copy that and send it to you. And Hans says, have you heard about the Irish guy? I don't think this is a joke. Sounds like the beginnings of one. Have you heard about the Irish guy who got his bees to draw out comb in the shape of a shamrock by placing magnets on top of an acrylic crown board? Would that prove that bees use?
Yeah, I think I've seen this.
Right. He says, I wonder if that proves that bees use energy lines because of that.
I don't know. No, I think you need to do quite a lot of work on it.
Somebody else says, how do you know that you're not detecting water flow under the ground? Oak trees need a lot of water.
I get that so many times. Well, they're straight, and there's just so many of them, and they're random, and they're all over the place. So no, I'm not. If I'm looking for water pipes, I'll find water pipes. But if I'm looking for water pipes, I don't pick up energy lines.
Okay, super. We'll have to leave it there.
I think so, because Tony's on next.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Roger.
All right. Okay, and you, Richard, and
see
hope to see some of you